Namaste, my witchlings. How are we doing today? I am Di the Yoga Witch. I'm a Navy veteran. I am a practicing pagan. I'm an ordained minister. And this is Bitchin Witch. Tonight, we are going to talk about something that has been sitting on my chest all forkin' week. Who gets to belong? Now, that might sound like a strange question, but stay with me, please. Recently, the Department of Defense reduced its list of recognized religious faith codes from more than 200 down to 31. Just 31. Now, according to the DoD, this was done to streamline chaplain services and because many of the removed faith codes were rarely used. Rarely used. Now, as a pagan veteran, I have some thoughts about that. Because let me tell you, religious freedom is not measured by popularity. The Constitution doesn't protect only the beliefs held by the majority. In fact, the entire purpose of constitutional protections is to safeguard the rights of minorities. You know, people whose beliefs are different, people whose voices are smaller, people who don't fit neatly into the dominant culture. The list of removed faiths included Wicca, Paganism. I'm not happy about it either. Druidism, Asatru, Heathenry, the Troth, Atheism, Humanism, Agnosticism, and Unitarian Universalism. Deism was also removed. And while the military insists that service members can still practice these faiths and still list them on their dog tags, something vitally important has changed. Visibility. Recognition, being counted. And that right there is where I want to start today's conversation. Because once we start deciding that some groups are too small to matter, we're no longer talking about efficiency. We are now talking about belonging. Let's start with the obvious question. Why does this matter? Well, I mean, after all, the Department of Defense says service members can still practice these faiths. We can still put them on our dog tags. We can still observe our beliefs. So what's the big deal? My darling dear witchlings, the big deal is visibility, recognition, and being counted. As a pagan veteran, I don't need the government to approve of my faith. I don't need the Department of Defense to agree with my faith. Frankly, I don't even need them to fucking understand my faith. But I do think it matters when the military decides that Wiccans, pagans, druids, heathens, humanists, atheists, agnostics, and dozens of other belief systems are no longer distinct enough to track individually. Because here's the thing, y'all. Religious freedom isn't just about whether you're allowed to practice. It is also about whether you're acknowledged, whether you're visible, and your existence is recognized. And when the justification becomes, well, those groups were rarely used, I have some questions, y'all. Rarely used by whom? How many practitioners does a religion need before it deserves recognition? 10,000? 1,000? 100? 1? Because constitutional rights aren't based on popularity. The First Amendment doesn't say you have freedom of religion as long as enough people agree with you. That's not how this works. In fact, and the entire purpose of constitutional protections is to protect minority viewpoints. The majority usually don't need protection. The majority already has influence, visibility, and plenty of representation. Rights matter most when they protect people who don't have those things. And that's the big reason why this conversation concerns me. Not because I think every faith needs a chaplain on every base, not because I think every belief system needs equal numbers, but because I believe every service member deserves to know that their beliefs count, that they matter, they're seen. The military spends enormous resources preparing for situations that happen very rarely. Search and rescue ops, casualty notifications, honor guard details, prisoner of war protocols. We don't eliminate those procedures because they're uncommon. We maintain them because they matter when they are needed. Religious accommodation should be viewed exactly the same fucking way. And I think there's another piece of this that deserves attention. Once we start organizing society around the idea that minority groups are too small to matter, we create an incredibly dangerous precedent. Because eventually, somebody gets to decide whose rights are important enough to keep. And history has shown us over and over and over again that those decisions rarely stop with one group. So today, it's pagan faiths. Tomorrow, it might be someone else. The issue isn't whether people agree with my religion. The issue is whether religious freedom applies equally to all religions. Because if freedom only protects the majority, then it really isn't fucking freedom, is it? It's preference. And there is a profound difference between the two. So that's where I'm going to leave this first segment. Not with a conclusion, but with a question. If religious freedom only applies and only matters when your beliefs are popular, was it ever really religious freedom at all? Now, before we go any further into this segment, I want to be very, very, very clear. This is not an anti-Christian segment. I know lots of Christians. I love lots of Christians. Some of the people I admire and admired most in this world are or were Christians. Some of the people fighting hardest against Christian nationalism are Christians! And that's where I want to introduce all of you to someone I think more people should know about. Her name is Monte Mader. One of the reasons I very much appreciate Monte's work is because she isn't speaking from the outside looking in. Monte has a very unique story. She grew up inside Christian nationalism. She attended Christian schools. She attended Liberty University. She studied the Bible extensively, and because Liberty required Bible studies to graduate, she completed her college-level biblical studies work in Israel. She knows the theology. Or in Israel or Jerusalem. Anyway, she knows the theology. She knows the culture. She knows the language. She knows the worldview. And what makes her fascinating is she didn't walk away from Christianity. She walked away from Christian nationalism. There's a difference, a huge difference there. Because Christianity is a religion. Christian nationalism is a political ideology. Christianity asks, how do I follow Christ? Christian nationalism asks, how do I use Christianity to gain political power? Maybe not necessarily in those words, but that is what it asks. And those are not the same question. And one of the things Monte does so fucking beautifully is when Christian nationalists or people come into her comments saying shit, and she will grab her Bible, and it is tabbed to hell and back, flip through it, and you can see all of the highlighted passages, and she will compare what the Christian nationalist claim Scripture says against what the Bible actually says. Not her opinion, not someone else's interpretation, the actual text, chapter, verse, context, and receipts. And over again, she demonstrates something many people do not want to hear right now. A lot of what gets presented as biblical ain't actually biblical. It's political, cultural, ideological. It is nationalism wrapped in religious language. That distinction matters. Because one of the most frustrating things about these conversations is that critics of Christian nationalism are oftentimes accused of attacking Christianity. But many of the loudest critics of Christian nationalism are Christians themselves. They are pastors, they are theologians, they are biblical scholars. Oh my God, they're my grandfather. Anyway, people like Monte who know the text well enough to recognize when it's being manipulated. And here's where I think this connects back to our first segment. When a nation begins treating one religion as the default identity of the country, everybody else becomes other. They become secondary, less visible, less important, less worthy of accommodation. And that's exactly why conversations about minority faiths matter. Because Christian nationalism doesn't simply say Christianity is good. It says Christianity should be privileged. And once any religion becomes privileged by the government, every other religion becomes vulnerable. That includes pagans, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, humanists, and atheists. And frankly, my dear, it eventually includes Christians who don't conform to the right version of Christianity. Ask the Mormons right now. Because that's the thing about authoritarian movements. They always start by identifying outsiders. Eventually, they start identifying the wrong insiders too. And that one brings us directly to our next segment. Because if we're going to talk about authority, conformity, belonging, and exclusion, we need to talk about someone who has spent her entire fucking life studying exactly those systems. And she's one of my favorite people, Daniella Mestyanek Young. But first, this. Let's take a step into theyogawitch.shop, where magic meets movement and your growth is supported on and off the mat. Now, this is a space for transformation where yoga and life coaching come together to help you move forward with clarity, confidence, and purpose at a pace your nervous system can actually sustain. Alongside your practice, you will find some handmade intention-infused jewelry and some really fun The Yoga Witch merch like coffee mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, and more. Yes, including some goodies for our furry familiars. Witchy Mama can't leave them out. So we can all carry a little bit of magic with us each and every day. There are tarot and oracle readings available when you are needing a little bit of insight, and a limited number of local services offered for those here in the Puget Sound region. But the heart of this space is supporting your daily practice, your growth, and your connection to yourself. So if something in your life is shifting, growing, or simply asking for some deeper intention, please realize this is your sign. Come explore what we can create together at theyogawitch.shop. If you're enjoying this podcast and feel called to step just a smidge bit deeper into our coven, consider tapping the join button and becoming a channel member. There are some really cool perks waiting for all of my witchlings, with membership level starting at just a single $1 a month. How affordable is that, y'all? But if membership is not in the cards for you right now, you can still support our channel here for free by subscribing and sharing this video with a friend. I appreciate all of you and all of your support. You guys are amazing and awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get back to the show. Man, I got the frizz today. All right, now let's talk knitting cult lady. Honestly, if you are not familiar with her work, I highly recommend looking her up, because Daniella brings a perspective to this conversation that very few people possess. Her background. She grew up inside the Children of God cult. And when I say cult, I don't mean a group I disagree with. I mean an actual honest-to-goodness cult. The Children of God was The Children of God was notorious for CSA, coercion, exploitation, and extreme control over its members. Daniella survived that environment. And she writes all about it in her first book. Then, in what she openly describes as joining another cult, she joined the United States Army. She became an Army intelligence officer, and yes, she and I both remain fully aware of the oxymoron that is Army intelligence, trust me. And then after some health issues led to her retirement from military service, she turned her attention toward understanding the system she had spent her entire life navigating. Today, she is a scholar of cults and high control groups, and one of the tools she has developed is something she calls her Culty Checklist. Now, what I appreciate about Daniella is that she doesn't start by asking, do I like this group? She doesn't ask, do I agree with this group politically? She asks, what behaviors are present? And that is a much better question because cults aren't defined by beliefs alone. Oops. They're defined by patterns. According to Daniella's framework, some of those patterns include a charismatic leader, a sacred assumption that cannot be questioned, a transcendent mission, an us versus them worldview, control of information, insider language, high exit costs, and a belief that the ends justify the means. Now, I am not here to tell you what conclusions to draw. I am not here to tell you what political movement does or does not qualify. What I am going to do is encourage you to ask questions. Healthy questions. Because healthy communities can survive questions. Healthy religions can survive questions. Healthy governments can survive questions. And healthy leaders can survive questions. Authoritarian systems struggle with questions. And that's one of the warning signs. Another thing Daniella talks about is language. How groups develop insider language, thought-stopping phrases, slogans, call and response behaviors, words that become identity markers rather than communication tools. And if you have spent any time studying history, religion, politics, or cults, you will recognize that pattern immediately. The specific words change, but the mechanism stays the same. The purpose is to simplify reality into binaries. Us, them, good, bad, friend, enemy, patriot, traitor, believer, and heretic. See what they're doing? It's a framework that discourages complexity. And complexity is where critical thinking lives. And here's one of the reasons I think Daniella's work matters so much right now. Because she's not warning people about one specific organization. I have watched her take on MLMs, Alcoholics Anonymous, and other obvious groups. I think she's taken on the Jehovah's Witnesses as well. She is teaching people how to recognize systems of control wherever they appear. Religious, political, corporate, social. The checklist isn't a weapon, it's a flashlight. And a flashlight doesn't tell you what to think. It simply helps you to see what's already there. So, before we move into our final segment today, I want to leave you with yet another question. If a movement discourages questions, If a movement discourages questions, demands loyalty, creates enemies, controls information, and insists that only one group has access to the truth, what exactly are we looking at? And perhaps more importantly, what happens when those systems gain power? Now, at first glance, these topics, my brain is not being nice to me today, please bear with me. At first glance, these topics do not seem connected. A Department of Defense policy change, Christian nationalism, a cult survivors checklist. 3 entirely different conversations. Except they aren't. Because underneath all 3 of these is the same fucking question. Who gets to belong? Who gets counted? Who gets recognized? Who gets protected? Who gets to define what is normal? And who gets pushed into the category of other? That's the thread. That's what I have been turning over in my head all fucking week. Because when I hear that minority faiths are being removed from a list because they're rarely used, I hear a message. Maybe not an intentional message, but a message nonetheless. You don't matter enough to count separately. You don't matter enough to track. You don't matter enough to recognize. And if you're part of a minority faith, you have heard versions of that message before. Pagans have heard it. Wiccans have heard it. Heathens have heard it. Humanists, atheists, queers, women, disabled people, immigrants, religious minorities, we have all heard it. The specifics change, yes, but the message stays remarkably consistent. You are acceptable as long as you stay quiet. Don't shove your relationship into my face. Don't shove your religion in my face. I don't want to see disabled people. You are acceptable as long as you stay silent and mostly invisible. And that right there is where Monte and Daniella's stories become so important. Because both of them grew up inside systems that taught people exactly who belonged, exactly who had authority, exactly who was allowed to ask questions, and exactly who was expected to obey. And both women eventually discovered something really powerful. Healthy systems don't fear questions. They don't fear curiosity. They don't fear examination, and they really don't fear accountability. In fact, healthy systems become stronger when people ask the hard questions. Only fragile systems demand unquestioning loyalty. Only authoritarian systems require obedience before understanding. Only high-control systems treat disagreement as betrayal. And that is why I think these conversations matter. Not because I want everybody to become pagan, hell no. Not because I want everyone to agree with me politically. Fuck that shit, that gets boring. Not because I want everybody to follow the same fucking path. Dear goddess, no, that would be so wrong. I don't. What I want is a society where people are free to follow different paths. A society where the government doesn't decide which faiths matter most. A society where disagreement is not treated as treason. A society where curiosity isn't treated as rebellion. And a society where belonging is not conditional. Because the moment belonging becomes conditional, freedom becomes conditional too. And once freedom becomes conditional, it really isn't freedom anymore, is it? It's permission. And permissions can be revoked. Rights are supposed to be harder to take away than that. I got murder mitts to the thigh. Now, take a sip. As we wrap up today, I want to bring this back to something personal. I am a pagan. I am also a veteran. And those two parts of my identity are not and never have been in conflict. When I raised my right hand and swore the oath that you can see on this nice little poster here, nobody asked me what church I attended. Nobody asked whether I was Christian. Nobody asked whether I was pagan. Nobody asked if I was religious at all, because that wasn't the fucking point. The point was the Constitution. It was the nation, and the point was the promise that people with different beliefs, different backgrounds, and different identities could still stand shoulder to shoulder in service to something larger than themselves. I've served alongside Christians, Roman Catholics, recovering Catholics, Jews, atheists, people who were deeply religious, and people who weren't religious at all. And what mattered wasn't whether we prayed the same way. What mattered was whether we could trust each other, whether we had each other's backs, whether we could accomplish the mission. That was what mattered. And that's why conversations like this concern me. Because, well, the moment we start deciding that some faiths matter more than others, we stop living up to the ideals we claim to defend. The moment we decide some people count less because there are fewer of them, we weaken the very fucking principles that make this damn country worth saving and serving. Religious freedom is not a gift from the majority. It's not something the government grants when it's convenient. It's a fucking inalienable right. And rights are tested not when they protect the people we agree with. Rights are tested when they protect the people we don't. And that is the entire point. So, whether you're Christian, pagan, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, humanist, atheist, agnostic, or something else entirely, I really want you to remember this. You do not have to agree with someone's beliefs to defend their right to hold them. You do not have to understand someone's faith to recognize their humanity. And you do not have to share someone's path to acknowledge that they belong, because belonging is not supposed to be conditional. Freedom is not supposed to be conditional. And citizenship is not supposed to be conditional. The oath I swore didn't require me to defend one religion. It required me to protect and support and defend the Constitution. And that Constitution protects all of us, especially those of us whose beliefs are unpopular, who are easy to overlook. We are the ones who are told we're too small to matter. Because if freedom only belongs to the majority, then freedom doesn't belong to anyone. And on that note, my lovely witchlings, a reminder. Hello. All right. Hey, Will. Oh, no. There we go. Okay, scrolling up. All right. Yep, we have Will. Haha. Yay, Will got new glasses. Always happy to see that. What? Oh, you're getting your new glasses. Brain not braining today, y'all. We're having a good day. I did also just get home from my damn acupuncture. I saw that. Dude, been there, done that, Will. It's so frustrating. Yep, nobody's chit-chatting here, so let's go ahead and go wrap up. My hair is frizzy as fuck. Yep, let's wrap up. And now, my lovely witchlings, it's time to go out and spread love, spread joy, and spread kindness. There's already enough darkness and hate in this world. Let us choose to be steady lights of love and hope for those stumbling in the shadows. Be sure your loved ones in all their forms, 2 legs, 4 legs, wings, fur, scales, paws, and claws, know exactly what you think of them. Because time is not a strict progression of cause to effect. It is more of a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff that moves faster than any of us realize, meaning those chances to say I love you one last time are never guaranteed. And if you take one thing, and one thing only, away from everything I say and do here, I hope it's that you always, always, always remember this. You are loved. You are wanted, you are needed, and your purpose for existing on this earth is real, even if you don't know what it is yet. I love you guys to bits. I hope all of you have the most magically fantabulous day or night, wherever you are. I will see you all again soon. Namaste, witchlings.